Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm back with another Bible journaling process for you guys. I'm continuing to work through the Famous Last Words devotional kit from ByTheWell4God. Now there is a new release going to be available for pre-sale very soon. It's actually going to start Friday, the 20th, August 20th. And so you can grab the new kit during that pre-sale, but don't worry, don't feel rushed. There are many of us still wrapping up and finishing up Famous Last Words. This is a fantastic kit. If you missed out and didn't grab it yet, I will link it down below so you can still grab it and some of the coordinating goodies that we'll be using in the video today. And then I will be doing a wrap-up video once I finish the kit showing all of my entries because I don't have a video for each and every single one, but you will be seeing them at the end. So I will post the videos that I've done so far down below for you guys. We're going to jump into day 5 for today's video. And the whole theme of this devotional is we're looking at some of the last statements of a few different people throughout the Bible. And so today for day 5, we're looking at the thieves on the cross. So as Christ hung there on the cross, he was surrounded by 2 other men who were actually criminals, unlike Christ, and they were dying as well. And so we are looking at 2 different kind of perspectives when it comes to Christ's death on the cross. And so one thief is more concerned about his temporary condition. He's worried about the fact that he is emanating death at that moment. He just has, a limited amount of time before he dies. And so he's crying out to Christ to save him from that temporary condition, that death and suffering that he is going through at the moment. But the second thief is more concerned about his eternal condition. And that is, what's going to happen after he dies and not so much, in the moment. He acknowledges, he did wrong. He confesses his sin, that he, in fact, deserves the treatment that he is getting there on the cross, though Christ does not. And he acknowledges who Christ is, and he calls out to him and asks him to remember me when you come into your kingdom. And so this is a great example of kind of how we should approach our own salvation. It's not so much about saving us from our hardships that we might have here on earth. There is no promise of that. As we become Christians and we are saved by what it is that Christ did on the cross and his resurrection, that does not guarantee us an easy life on earth. And many Christians can attest to that. Gosh, I know so many of us are praying. I'm going to try not to get choked up, praying for the many people over in Afghanistan currently, and the Christians over in Afghanistan. They are facing tremendous persecution that us as Americans and other countries can't even fathom the persecution that they are facing right now. And so this is very real for them, that being a Christian does not change the suffering that they have here on earth. However, they do have that hope to hold on to, that they are going to spend eternity with Christ, which is just amazing that we have that hope to hold on to. And so, when we look at this, we need to be concerned about acknowledging who Christ is so that we don't receive the wrath of God that we deserve for our sinful behavior. And so I will have more of kind of the heart behind the art over on my blog. So if you want kind of, to sit down and read through that, I will link that down below. But that's kind of the heaviness that we're facing as we journal in day 5. And so Judy has here some great reflection questions or kind of prompts for us as we work through day 5. And so I wanted a big kind of statement piece, a big cross on the page that we will be creating here. And so I want to kind of balance this. The video is going to be focused on the art process, and that's not to lighten the severity of the topic of today, but this is just so that you can get the art part, the techniques, that kind of thing. And if you want the heart behind the art, definitely go check out my blog post. But so we're going to be journaling in Luke 23, verses 40 through 42. There are a few different passages listed on day 5, but this is where I'm going to be camping out, which is actually looking at the second thief, the one that acknowledged who Christ was there on the cross. And so this was a perfect one to video because I have a unique situation here that I know many of you face and ask about. And I always say, kind of passing how easy it is to take care of this situation, but I thought it would be a time to show you how to take care of this. So I am working in my interleaved Bible, which is a full blank page in between each page of text. And so Luke 23, 40 through 42 is actually right here. And as you can see, I've already journaled and created on this opposing page here. And when I did this page, I did prep it with some gesso, but only one layer. I wasn't concerned about bleed through. I was just more concerned about giving myself a white background to work on. So I only applied one layer. I also used some crackle paste, so there's some texture on this page. And I also used some distress sprays. So there was, these are a dye, this one's dye and pigment, but there are dye-based sprays as well, which we know those bleed through. And so as a matter of fact, I have a situation on the back of the page. So this is actually where I'm gonna be doing my journaling, and then I'll just indicate that the passage is over here. But I've got some bleed through here where I didn't have the gesso 100%. Luckily, that bleed through is in colors that coordinate with the kit, but we are going to cover that up. But if I didn't cover it up, it would have been fine. And then you can see that crackle actually left texture on the page. Now, I don't know if the camera is going to pick that up, but there is definitely, it almost looks like snake skin. Like there is definitely some texture happening on here, and we are going to embrace that, and we're actually going to enhance that texture and use it to our benefit. So this is where I really love mixed media. I know mixed media isn't for everybody, and so some of us like those softer kind of watercolor style and things like that. But if I was to go and watercolor some florals on here, I would definitely have a mess because I'm contending with this texture. And so since I'm just going to be doing some mixed media, we're going to embrace this and actually use this as the foundation for our mixed media that we're going to be doing. And so I am going to go ahead and prep it with some gesso for two reasons. One, to kind of cancel out the color that I have coming through, but also I want to be concerned that I don't have anything bleed through and mess up this page that I've already done. So I want to make sure that I do cover this in some gesso. You can use clear gesso. I'm going to use white gesso today. And then we're going to do some techniques to kind of embrace that texture and just kind of have a quick little background. I also wanted to show you some fun techniques with the pattern papers. I know not everybody's comfortable using, paper or paper crafting in their Bible journaling. So I wanted to show you a fun technique with the pattern papers. The papers in this collection are stunning on their own. They have a lot of their own texture and detail and things like that. But I wanted to show you how to turn this paper into faux wood. So I'm going to be using a wood embossing folder, and we are going to make a wood cross as our centerpiece for this page with some texture. We're going to really grunge it up to look like it's been distressed wood. And so I kind of wanted to walk you through how I do that. So everything will be linked down below. Again, don't forget to check out the corresponding blog post. Let me go ahead and put you guys on fast forward, and we'll go ahead and put this page together. Okay, so I'm going to start out by prepping it with some gesso. Again, you can do this with clear gesso, watercolor ground, matte gel medium, whatever you like to page prep with. I'm just using some inexpensive white gesso, and I am applying it pretty thick. I'm okay with there being brush strokes. I'm using a pretty grungy brush because that will add a little more texture as well. But I'm going to coat that once. I'm going to dry it, and then I'm going to add a second coat and then make sure it's super, super good and dry before moving on. So I'm spraying the page with a little bit of water first. That way my inks move, and I'm spraying it with some Tattered Rose Distress ink, some Tattered Rose Distress Oxide spray, and then I will add a little bit of tea dye spray as well. And you'll see that this is a super fluid ink, these sprays, and so they kind of settle in all of the grooves and nooks and cranny of the texture and really kind of amplify the texture. So with a background like this, it's just a process. I spray and dry, lift and spray. I'm just constantly playing around till I get it just how I want it. The color comes out pretty strong, and then as it dries, it's like watercolor where it kind of dries back lighter. So just keep that in mind as you're working. But these are water reactive inks. So as long as your page is prepped with gesso or matte gel medium, something like that, you can lift this color off. So if it gets to be too intense, we can soften it. And I'll show you how I do that in a second here. But I'm going to move on to kind of distressing it some more. So I pulled out some frayed burlap distress ink, and a makeup blending brush. This is kind of my favorite way to blend inks. And I'm adding some of this frayed burlap to the edges of the page. And then I will lightly kind of dust it over the page. And this is going to make that white not be so stark. And it's going to give it more of that antique look. I am kind of being a little more heavy-handed over the crackle texture. That way the ink kind of grabs a hold of the tops of that texture. Again, just trying to kind of amplify it and bring it out. I brought in a sample piece just to kind of see how the background was looking, and it was too dark. So I sprayed the page with water, and then I rub a paper towel or like lay a paper towel over the top of it, and that's going to lift excess ink. And so you can see instantly it lightens that entire background, so it's not as strong. It doesn't conflict as much with the elements I'm going to add over the top. I still wanted to bring out that texture just a little bit more, so I grabbed a blending tool and some Distress Oxide ink in frayed burlap. The oxides are a little softer than the original Distress inks, and that's why I chose to go this route. And then I'm just lightly skimming my tool over the top of the areas where that crackle paste is, and you'll see it's just kind of further bringing out that crackly texture. So I'm going to set that aside to dry and start working on the other elements. So here I pulled out one of the patterned papers from the release. This is an add-on item that you can pick up. And I'm cutting this down to create my cross. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and figuring out the proportions as I go along. The nice thing about starting with these papers is it has all this stamping and texture and things on it. So you don't have to do as much work to colorize it and add some interest. If you do not have embossing folders or a die cutting machine, you could do this just as is. You could cut this out and leave it just like this, and it will be totally fine, but I'm going to add some texture. So I'm going to take those pieces and spray the front and the back with a little bit of water before adding it into this lumber embossing folder. I've shown my sandwich a few times. This is not the advised sandwich, so do it at your own risk, but I have the base plate, the embossing folder, and then my embossing mat. And that is a sandwich I use for these 3D texture folders. My paper was a little bit longer than the folder, so I'm just flipping it around and catching the end that was sticking out. It all blended together just fine. I'm going to do the same thing for the crossbeam piece. I'm just trying to eyeball the different knots and things that are in that wood grain to figure out which area I want on the paper. At this point, it doesn't look like much, but we're gonna amplify the texture. So we can set this aside and start working on distressing these wood pieces. So I want to make sure I dry this first. I have found that drying it just kind of cements the texture into the paper, kind of makes it more permanent. And these texture folders have tons of texture. They are super amazing. But we need to bring it out a little bit because that paper is busy, so you can't really see it at this point. So I have a Distress crayon in picket fence. I have Distress ink in frayed burlap and Distress paint in weathered wood. Don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through it. So I'm starting with the Distress paint in weathered wood. I'm applying that across the paper, and then I'm using a baby wipe to wipe away the excess paint. So I'm just wanting the paint to be down in the nooks and crannies, and I'm wiping it off of the high points of the texture. And you'll see this is slowly gonna start letting you see the texture of that folder. Now I'm going in with the Distress crayon, same thing. I'm gonna apply it to the paper and then wipe it off of the high points of the texture. And so it's gonna leave this, it almost looks like this wood had been painted blue and then painted white and it's been chipped away. And so it's just kind of sitting in the nooks and crannies of the paper. So now I wanna dry this before I move on to the ink. And you can try this with a variety of different colors and get different effects. But now I'm going in with the frayed burlap Distress ink, and I'm rubbing the ink pad across the top of the paper. And you'll see this is highlighting the high points of that texture. And here's where you can really see the knots and the grain of that paper. Now, it does kind of obliterate some of the texture that was on the paper to begin with, the printed texture, but that's okay. You can still see it in person. I did feel like it needed a little bit more contrast, so I'm going in with some ground espresso Distress ink and just adding that to a few areas to kind of deepen up the wood that's being exposed. And you can see how that, I mean, it looks like weathered wood, right? It's amazing. Now, I know in Bible times, Christ probably wasn't crucified on a cross that had been painted blue. Let's just ignore that. I'm just trying to go with the colors of what I'm working with. So this is not true to like historical, factual looks. All right. So now I can kind of position things and kind of see what I'm working with. I pulled out these floral elements from the die cuts in the kit. I did trim away some of the white border, and then I'm going in with some more frayed burlap ink and that makeup brush to add that again, to just kind of knock back the white. The whole kind of theme of this kit is very vintage. And so I want all of the elements to kind of blend with that. So I'm just adding a little bit of that ink to those die cut pieces, and then we can start assembling things. So I'm going to figure out where I want it on the page. I am going to use liquid adhesive because there is a ton of texture. I've got texture on the background, I got texture on the paper, and so liquid adhesive is going to be your best option for adhering things down. And a lot of the background does get covered up, but that's okay. You can still see peaks of it peeking out, but this is just a way to show you how to deal with that bleed through and the mess that we had happening from that other page. So I'm just building up, letting some things kind of peek from behind it. I will stick some things over the top of it. My hands get inky and messy. If distress ink on your hands bugs you, you can always wear gloves while working with it. It might sound a little fussy. I just, live my life with ink all over my fingers. It's not the end of the world. So I pulled out this journaling spot from the die cuts that come in the kit, and this is going to be my title and where I journal a little prayer. So I'm using the Tile Alphas. These were an add-on, and I'm going to add the title Mercy and Grace. This was pulled from the devotional content for the day. I'm mixing the ampersand from the alphas that came with the kit, and then I will journal out just a little bit of prayer, just wanting to keep my focus on Christ and not the suffering that's going on in my life. I want to keep the eternal condition, right? I want that to be my main focus as I live my life. So at this point, you could be good. We could leave it right here, but I felt like it just needed some dimension, a little something extra. So we're going to do some foiled butterflies. I've done these before. You've probably seen them on my channel. I have a piece of vellum. I'm dusting it with EK Success powder tool because we are going to do some heat embossing. So these butterflies are from ByTheWell4God as well. So I'm going to coat that vellum really good with the powder tool. That way my embossing only sticks to my stamped areas. I'm going to ink this up with some Versamark clear sticky ink and then stamp it down onto the vellum. Now, a sweet subscriber sent me this tool. This thing is amazing. She did just mention or message me and let me know that she is selling these now. It makes it so that you can apply even pressure to your stamp positioning tool and get a really good impression without having to push down on like the ball of your hand, like the palm. It's just makes it so amazing. So I will link her information down below for you guys so you can go scout out that tool for yourself if you want. It stays on my desk and I use it all the time. So now I went ahead and applied some Princess Gold embossing powder to those stamped butterflies. And then with vellum, you want to make sure that your heat tool or embossing tool is good and hot. And then I heat it from the back first, and then I go from the front and melt it. That way I have as minimal curling of the vellum as possible. And then now I can fussy cut these out, and you just have these super beautiful, delicate little butterflies to add to the page. But before that, I'm going to add just a little more color. So I felt like there needed to be a little more blue. And so I pulled out some Speckled Egg Distress Oxide Spray, and I am going to sprinkle that around the page a little bit. You'll notice that I have Smurf fingers. Learn from me. I went to shake this and I had not closed it all the way the last time I'd used it. In fact, I put it back on the shelf that it goes onto, not with the lid on all the way. Praise Jesus. I had stuff underneath me when it spilled everywhere, so it did not spill on the carpet. It spilled on some boxes and things. And now I have Smurf fingers. So, make sure your lids are on. But I sprinkled that around and then heat set that, made sure it was good and dry. And that just is going to kind of tie in where I'm putting the butterflies. And again, adding just a little bit more blue. With vellum pieces, you have to be kind of strategic where you add your adhesive. So I'm just adding the glue to the center body parts of the butterfly, and that way the wings kind of fluff up. When I close my Bible, these do flatten, but they're really easy to kind of pop back up when you turn to the page. And then since I am journaling on the backside of where the scripture actually is, I'm making sure to add the verse reference over here in the gutter, and then I'm adding the date as well. That way I know where this page belongs. And that is going to be it. You'll be able to see here, it did not mess up the prior entry. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Don't forget to check out the corresponding blog post. All the links to everything that I used will be in the description box down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And be sure to click on that bell notification button so you don't miss any future videos from me. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.